Ready? Today is Tuesday, July 30th, 2019, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tennessee Board of Accountancy. This regularly scheduled meeting is taking place in Conference Room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. The meeting date, time, and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on July 22nd, 2019. I want to call the roll, please. Here.
Gay Moon.
Here.
Andy Bonner.
Here.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Greg Gilbert.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Here.
Todd Skelton.
Present.
Trey Watkins.
Here.
Judy Weatherby.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, all are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you. We have two new members today that I'd like to introduce. Greg Gilbert from Knoxville, Tennessee, who was appointed by Governor Lee to serve a 3-year term beginning July 1st. Greg's filling the East Tennessee position previously held by Casey Stewart. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Todd Skelton, attorney at law from Knoxville, Tennessee, who was also appointed by Governor Lee to serve a 3-year term. He is taking the position that was previously held by Gabe Roberts. So, welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
Additionally, Kevin Monroe and Pamela Church have been reappointed for another 3-year term, so glad to have y'all back. Let's see, a few announcements. The hearing originally noted in the agenda has been continued, and we'll deal with that in October. And just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded, and to please speak into your microphones as you speak. So, let me get back to my iPad here. Going to adopt the agenda we presented. So do we need a motion to do so?
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. You should have on your iPads the copy of the May 7th, 2019 minutes. We'll take just a minute or so to review that, and then I'll ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Chance to review. Need more time?
I move that we accept the minutes. Second.
But we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. Wendy, you want to give your executive director report, please?
Sure. The first item on the report is just a reminder of future meeting dates, and then a proposal for our October 2020 date. Just a reminder that the upcoming October meeting is a Wednesday-Thursday meeting, which is not our typical 2 dates, so hopefully that's already on your calendar. The proposal for October of 2020 is back to a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Monday, Tuesday, sorry, so October 20th for the board meeting. We can vote on that at the end of the director's report. Just an update on the leadership here at the Department of Commerce and Insurance. Commissioner McPeak announced her resignation in May and left the department in June. Deputy Commissioner Carter Lawrence was sworn as interim commissioner. And also in May, Toby Compton joined the department as the assistant commissioner. So he is now over the regulatory boards division. He is traveling this week. I had hoped he could come down and introduce himself, but he is traveling. So we have it on his calendar to attend in October and talk with you all for a few minutes. Sunset hearing scheduled. We did mention this a little bit yesterday. The sunset here, this board is scheduled to sunset June 30 of 2020. So we will start the hearing process at the end of August, on August 21st. We will go before the Commerce, Labor, Transportation, Agricultural Joint Subcommittee of Government Ops. That's long. So we, at the end of this meeting, we'll have our officer elections, and depending on who is chairman, will give that person the first opportunity to attend this with me on the 21st. If the chairman cannot attend, then we can locate someone else that has that open on their calendar to attend with me, but we do need somebody from the board to attend. We also, it sounds like, have been assigned a rule review for their CPE rules on that date. This is standard procedure. We go in front of government ops. In the past, we have not had board members attend those hearings, but they are asking for a board member to attend that this time. So it's the same day, so hopefully whoever can attend the sunset hearings can stay after lunch and attend the rule review as well. NASBA meetings, just to recap, the Eastern Regional was held in June, and that was in Washington, D.C. Andy, Janet, Pam, Larry, and myself attended those meetings. I think Andy's going to give us a recap, a little bit of the Board of Directors, which I think will incorporate things we talked about there as well. Upcoming meetings, NASBA's annual meeting is in October in Boston. Andy and Judy have expressed interest in attending, and Larry also expressed interest the other day. So based on if the board approves for 4 board members to go, we still have another spot for anyone who's interested in attending that meeting in October. The dates are there. It's usually, I think, 3 days. Also wanted to congratulate Andy. I didn't put that in the director's report, but he has been nominated again to serve on NASBA's Board of Directors for another 1-year term as the Eastern Regional Director. Correct? Did I say that correctly? Yeah, so they will vote on that at the annual meeting for another year for Andy. So congratulations, Andy. CPE Evolution, I think we've talked about this several times, and I did send something, I think, in my last update email maybe a month or so ago about the process of getting feedback on that currently. There is a great website, which I included in the director's report, with some FAQs, some real easy reading on what the initiative is, and I think Andy will talk a little bit more about that. I think the deadline, Pam, you indicated there was a deadline for comments or feedback.
It's August
9th.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they're looking for individual feedback. So please, if you're interested in sharing your thoughts, please go to this site and do that. So they're not looking for necessarily a board response or board comment. One of the other things I wanted to point out that I hope you all got in an email, but at the regional meeting we were introduced to a new group called the Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensing. The acronym is ARPL, and it's a joint effort between NASBA and the AICPA to combat and educate legislators on the importance of learned professions and giving boards and states tools to educate their legislatures as session comes around, and potentially there are bills introduced that reduce the requirements of occupational licensing, and in some cases try to eliminate them. So this is just a way to help all of us be informed, and they've hired a an advertising company, basically, to put this type of stuff together. So the presentation was great that we heard at the Eastern Regional, but keep an eye out for updates from that as well. We did do our spring-summer newsletter that was distributed to all licensees via email in June, and it is located on the homepage of our website. If you all ever have something you want to write and you want to include in the newsletter, feel free to let me know. I'll be happy to publish something from a member of the board. Or if you have content you would like us to include. We have been doing it twice a year. The approval process is usually about a couple of weeks to a month, so we have to create the content, then get it approved, then get it laid out. So it is a little bit of a time. It takes a little while to get it put together, but we could consider doing additional ones if you all feel like it's necessary or would be positive. The CPE audit. So as you all know, we had some deficiencies last year that the board was concerned about. We had almost 30% non-compliance rate. So one of the efforts we took this year was at renewal, if somebody indicated they did not complete their CPE requirements, we held the renewal and we did not renew the license. So I think this proved to be positive, and so our stats are a little bit better this year. As of the report that you have, we had a 15% non-compliance rate. Karen has given me, we've received more audits in because the deadline has passed. So we are at 11% non-compliance rate as of today, and I think we're done. We have 3 that are in process.
That's a great improvement.
Right. So we still have 14 non-responses. So as you all see the legal report, sometimes you have a slew of CPE-related cases, and sometimes you see none. Well, you'll see a slew in October because we have 14 who haven't responded to the audit. So we will be opening complaints the first week of August for those who did not respond. And currently that stands at 14. So anyway, the numbers are there, and again, I think that we've had some positive changes, and then with the implementation of requesting a listing at renewal, I think will help people be more cognizant of the CPE they've taken and ensure that they've met those requirements before they renew. One of the things that we may want to consider, you know, we do have this non-compliance rate, and in some of these cases, these people didn't complete any CPE, but they indicated on the renewal that they did. So is that, you know, I think that's probable cause for a complaint.
I would agree.
Okay, so I wanted to get your kind of thoughts on that before I open complaints in that manner. I think there's
When you're lying on an application.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a real problem.
Yeah. You know, if it's a couple hours and a misunderstanding
Right.
of what qualified and didn't, I don't have as much concern of that. But if you're significantly deficient, that's hard for me to think that you didn't know that at the time that you were applying. So there's only a few in that situation. I would say less than 5, but there are a couple. Any questions?
I think it's disappointing that there's even that many, you know?
I know.
It's just.
Wendy, the ones you held back, I mean, would we have been at 38% had you
Probably
not
wouldn't
held
have
back?
been that many. I think we ended up having about 20 to 25 that expired without attesting that they had completed, and those we would have let go through before,
Right.
and then audited them. So those people expired rather than renewed and going through the audit.
You and I had talked at the last meeting, I guess, afterwards about the fact that in light of Casey's retirement,
Right.
we were just chatting about the fact that I guess if you were close to retirement or retiring your license or going inactive or
Right.
whatever, that you, in theory, would not get 80 hours of CPE those last 2 years. Is that there's no way for us to control that? You're not looking at that, I guess, when they go out, so I guess it doesn't matter. But was that an accurate assessment of what we were talking about? The fact that
Not remembering the conversation, but so.
it's like Casey was going inactive. I'm not saying Casey did this.
Right.
I'm just saying it was just a thought I had was if you're in the last 2 years of your licensing
Right.
requiring CPE, there's no way to. If you go inactive before you're renewing your license, then you
We
possibly don't
know.
even get.
We have a lot of people that do that.
Yeah.
So before, if you're due to renew 12/31, you can go inactive in November, and we don't question that.
Right.
Because you didn't ask for the renewal.
And I'm not sure we should. I
Yeah.
just was. It was
Now,
an
what we
interesting
do,
thought.
and the board has been supportive of this, is, so if you're selected for audit in May, you're in the audit pool, and then you contact me and say, oh, wait, I want to go inactive, I didn't get my CPE. We've still held them accountable for those hours because they renewed, they answered the questions, they were active at the time and should have been getting the CPE.
Most CPAs, when they're going inactive, they do not get any education those last 2 years. Yeah, everybody I talk to says that.
Wendy, one more question on the no responses. I think we said we currently had 14 or
Yeah.
thereabouts. How does that compare to prior years at this juncture?
Normally open 10 complaints for non-response, so it's very close.
Okay, thank
So
you.
hopefully so what happens is, if you don't meet the initial deadline, you get a certified mail saying you have an additional 30 days and a complaint would be open if you don't respond. So I believe that deadline for those folks is August 3rd, so hopefully we'll get a few more responses, and then after August 3rd is when we'll open the complaints on those that did not respond.
When you have those, is some of that due to the fact that maybe we've lost touch with them?
Yes.
Is that the big part of
Because
it?
typically what happens is we open the complaints, and then all of a sudden, because it's certified mail, well, we sent the certified mail, but we open the complaints, and now all of a sudden they say, well, I'm in California, I didn't mean to have my license open there, I'm inactive or whatever. So there's a lot of stories like that, yes, that they didn't update their address or something like that. But we send.
Do you have authority administratively to deal with that? I mean, I guess at that point, if you track this person down before it becomes a complaint, I guess you're going to open a complaint against all 14.
We don't go through an extensive effort to track people down when their information's not correct, because they're obligated to be updating their information with us.
Gotcha.
Other thoughts on the audit? Okay. Just quickly, TSCPA activities. I attended TSCPA's council meeting and convention in June in Asheville, North Carolina. The AICPA Board of Examiners committee asked me to serve on their state board committee, and I accepted. And this group is made up of state board executive directors and members, and the goal is to be a link between the Board of Examiners and boards and a communication vehicle. And so this group, as I understand it, meets 3 times a year, one in a video type conference and 2 travel to a location where they meet directly with the Board of Examiners. So kind of a new venture for me because I haven't been exam results attached to your document are the second quarter exam results for Tennessee, as well as overall statistics. Performance metrics, these are what we are tracked on within the department. Average number of licensing days, our goal is to be equal to or less than the prior year. And these are May and June numbers for 2018 and 2019. So there was a little bit of an anomaly in June of 18 for that 16.81, and I don't recall exactly what that was, but we typically run between 3 and 7 days on average to get licenses out to individuals.
That when we extended because of the changes in the exam.
No, basically, I don't think so. I think we've tried to improve our process for reciprocal licenses. A lot of times people will apply for a reciprocal and they haven't even notified their other state to send the confirmation, so we have to wait on that. So it causes for some of them, the time to kind of trickle on, so it takes longer to get those through the process. Also, trying to educate exam takers not to apply for the license immediately after passing the exam, because it takes NASPA a good 4 weeks or so to get all of those files over to us, and we can't approve license till we have that. So that's kind of what adds, really most of them are done in the same day we receive them if everything's there. But sometimes people apply really before that they should or before we have everything that we need. And sometimes people apply and don't pay, and we can't do anything until they pay. So that's another. And then your just general stats on new licenses issued and the overall licensing numbers, which still appear to creep up each year. So that's good news. And I think that concludes my report. If there are any questions, any additional questions, and then I'd like to vote on that additional meeting date.
I have two quick questions.
Sure.
Do we have the number of candidates that are actually sitting for the exam just tracked over time? I know we
would have it in these reports, but I don't have it in an Excel spreadsheet of sorts, but we could do that if
I
you
was just
like.
curious to see.
Okay.
I mean, and the other question is, I was looking at on page 2 of 2, the CPA exam performance summary. This is a weird question, but on the gender chart, why did it start in Q3 of 2018? We had non-reported, and then it just ramped way up. Was there something different about how we reported that?
You know, I noticed that too, and just didn't have a chance to reach out. This comes from NASBA, so I'd have to reach out and get that answer from them. So I can
Strange that-
certainly do that.
I was just curious. I mean, it's not like a big deal.
ASBA said it was a tax law change. Tax law, when you had, where it ramped up.
No,
For the new-
I think
gender,
what he's saying in Q2 of 19 are for gender on those non-reported skyrocketed
Yeah, I mean,
compared to previous
They
quarters.
just have the option not to specify? I mean, maybe that became optional at that point.
That's my question. I don't know. It just
Because
seems
that would make
strange. It just-
sense, that you certainly
something
see that a
changed.
lot now.
I'll check on it and just see, because I glanced at that and saw it too.
Andy, this, one more question on the overall licensing, overall population
Yeah.
chart in the director's report. You know, in the past, we had this little kerfuffle with respect to fees for retired and 65 and who had to pay what when. In your view, are we kind of past that? Has that kind of been adequately dealt with at this point?
To the best that we can. So for our new members, and a reminder for everybody else, the categories of retired 65 and retired are no longer available to new folks to move to that category. So these were prior categories that were created without really authority in law and rule, and so we had to cease offering them, but we didn't transfer those people or try to cause frustration in their world to move them to another status. So retired 65 folks do not pay and actually don't renew at all. So they move to that status and we kind of lose contact with them. So if somebody finds themselves in that situation now, so you're retired, you're 65, and you remember the status that we had, you can apply for inactive status, and if you're over 60, if you're 65 or older, then we waive the fees. So in essence, it's the same benefit, but we don't really have that title any longer.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
Did you say kerfuffle?
Yes.
I've not heard that word before. Let the minutes show that we learned a new word today. Any other comments? I'll ask for a motion to approve the executive director's report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And that's to include the date of the proposed meeting as well,
Yeah.
in October of 20?
Yes.
Okay.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next item, we had a hearing scheduled, but it's obviously been continued to October, so we'll move forward to NASBA updates. Andy, you want to give us a Board of Directors update?
Be happy to. There was a lot of talk about the CPE or CPA evolution and really the draft vision statement, the principles and concepts. And Wendy's already kind of, talked about it a little bit. And, that the evolutioncpa.org, the website is sitting out there. And it was a lot of encouragement to get CPAs across Tennessee to go out and to actually go to the website and answer questions associated with it. Specifically, they asked that they didn't really want to hear from boards, but they wanted to encourage all board members to go out and to get your thoughts and input, because we're getting close on the guiding principles, and they want to make sure that everybody's on page and that they need as much feedback as they can get. And of course, this is a task force with the AICPA and NASPA that's putting this together. And, there was a lot of talk about the guiding principle number 4. That's the key. And that seems to be the one that's getting a lot of discussion. We were told at the board meeting that that it's only one pathway to the CPA and one exam for all, and that there'll be no dual pathway. At the end of the day, the principles are the principles. They're just a starting point, and that really the details is what everybody is waiting for. But there's still some people who are very concerned about principle number 4. So take a look at that and let your voice be heard, because they really want to hear it. We got to Lori Tisch is our incoming chair for NASPA, and she's in the process of putting committees together. And so she says that in a couple of weeks they're going to have the committees there. So if you've applied for a committee, expect some kind of response in the next couple of weeks, is what she indicated at the meeting. The AICPA and they're going to meet, and when they meet with NASPA, they have a summit twice a year, and really the evolution project is going to be the key that they're going to talk about. Is what they indicated to us. Carlos Barrera is our incoming chair, or vice chair-elect rather, from Brownsville, Texas. Just a really great guy. Exciting to see him there. We kind of associate with NASPA on the international relevance as far as mutual recognition agreements. We've kind of given that over to them. Just be on the lookout that they are in deep conversations with South Africa right now about having a MRA. So that was kind of cool. As far as the technology update, they continue to go through with their outsourcing their technology. Everything's going pretty good. They have a couple of pains associated with it, but I think at the end of the day, based on the information we got as board members, that you're going to see some continued improvement from NASPA in that area. As far as the CPA audit services, we were excited to hear about that. We're in the test group for it. There have been a couple of little software conflicts where a lot of companies are coming out on the vendor side with secure software to keep from getting viruses or other things into your systems, and so there are a couple little things that cause it to shut down associated with that, and that's being fixed. And so as far as the first 6 states that went live, those are the only 6 that are on right now. They postpone the other till they get that fixed, and you would expect that with a new product, so that's good. And I'd say that they're not the only ones that are having that experience, because a lot of softwares are really tightening up for viruses and other things that are happening in the cyber world. NASPA continues to watch the exam, and they said that the levels haven't bounced back as fast, and I'd say that we've seen that too. And they say one of the effects is the new tax law. The other effect is the economy. The economy is so good that people are postponing because they can get good jobs without having to go and sit for the CPA exam. And so that really is what they're saying that the issue is right now, but they anticipate it's going to bounce back. Continuous testing is going well. They said that a lot of boards have taken an active role and that they're changing very quickly. In fact, AICPA and NASPA is actually working to get ready for the change, and so they've already started in the background a bit. They said that April the 1st, 2020 is going to be a go, no-go date. So the go date would be July 1st, 2020. So they're going to decide at that point at what date they're actually going to turn on the continuous testing. Dan Dustin gave us an update where he goes out and meets with state boards. NASPA sees this as a very important project. We've got down that we last met with Dan in 2017, and so we expect him to come in our 2020 board meeting sometime. So think about that, and when he comes, he wants to hear our input about what issues we have with NASPA or issues going on. So a lot of things there when he comes. The coalition that Wendy talked about, the Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensing, ARPL. And I'll just read what they had on their website. It says, a coalition of national associations that represents highly complex technical professionals and their national licensing boards. Slogan, professional licensing, rigorous for a reason. They really wanted to encourage each of the boards to go out and to actually touch that website and check it out. It's they're really excited about it. NASBA and AICPA are two of the founding members of that, along with other very technical professionals across the United States. And so that part of it was kind of exciting to see that they were taking a proactive move to say, hey, we need licensing for CPAs because of, and not only us, but other professional boards do too. And you're going to do the audit side, so I'll leave that for you. Staff augmentation. This is a really important subject. I've been monitoring it, and quite honestly, I'm kind of shocked that it's gotten to this point. There was a NASBA exposure letter that was sent out where they were dramatically opposed to the changes. Wendy actually sent it out to us in a 7/12/19 newsletter or email that she sent out to the board members. It's basically staff augmentation is where firms lend staff to attest clients. The staff would work for the client, and the client would tell them what to do, but they would actually be paid by the firm. It's very concerning that just the appearance of this, if something were to go wrong with the audit, that there would be an issue. And really the entire board thought that we were really putting firms in harm's way by even allowing it. I think AICPA is very much in favor of it. The Peak Committee, Professional Ethics Executive Committee, is going to address it on 8/19/19. The concern is that, you've got the UAA, and we kind of go back to the code of ethics from in the UAA. We mentioned that and say that's kind of where, we've been trying to get all the states or all the 55 jurisdictions to come in and accept that as a standard. And so if Peak passes it, this would be the standard, which NASBA went out and said, hey, we really want everybody to have a unified code on this side. And the end result is that by doing this, we would be held to allow staff augmentation. Now, Wendy's been talking about it, and I'll let her jump in here because as far as how it actually hits Tennessee, because I asked her and she gave me some information.
So we have not modified our rules to accept AICPA's Code of Conduct in full. We do have a Code of Conduct section in our rules, which touches a lot of the common areas very lightly. And then we have a section that says that we refer to the code and anything that's not mentioned here. So we don't talk about staff augmentation in our rules, so we would have to refer to the code with reference to that if anything came up. That would be the standard that CPAs would be required to comply with. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
So very concerned about that. In other words, the board may have to address something associated with it. The other thing was that at the convention, since or the Eastern Regional that we had, the 120-150 task force came back and they decided, or they proposed that nothing be done, that we keep the 150. But what they did decide was that there was a lot of misunderstanding associated with those 30 hours, that maybe there should be more emphasis about what it should be. And it kind of ducktailed into the CPA evolution project that's going on. So I think what you're going to see is that you're going to see that the Education Committee, the CPA Exam Committee, and then the CPA Evolution Committee are really going to get together, and things are going to change quick. Because they're all concerned about the fact that we change the CPA exam every 7 years, but we have this change in technology that's occurring that we need to change it faster, and that it really needs to get pushed down into the educational grounds and kind of take off. And, of course, I think all the educators were very much for that. But I think you're going to see a lot more in that area. Also, they're going to send out some talking points to go back. One of the articles they sent us to say, hey, here, you got to remember why we went to this. And Jan Williams from the University of Tennessee was one of the articles that they sent out to everybody. And so they're going to send out some talking points and update us in that area to bring back to each board. So I'm sure I'll have something. This just happened Friday, so I'm sure I'll have something for the next meeting there.
Like you said a while ago at the Eastern Regional, one of the things they talked a lot about was trying to better define what those 30 are for, because what's happened, a lot of schools are using those to allow students to do a lot of things that have nothing to do with accounting and don't further that certification requirement. But it's a perfect opportunity to use that 30 for the new technology standard that we're trying to address with some of this other stuff. So there was a lot of talk at the Eastern Regional about, if we're going to have the 30, let's define what it has to be, or at least put some parameters in there as opposed to having it just like wide open. So it's kind of a compromise. Instead of doing away with the 30, let's define it, is the way I took it.
I hope that they'll come to some conclusions and make a big change at once in the future instead of doing it, because we've had several major changes to the exam in content and format. That really wreaks havoc for the students and the professors and the schools. And right now I'm hearing so many different opinions, but I did hear that quickly they want to incorporate some form of data analytics, which I think is very appropriate. But throw things out there every 6 months and make people deal with it.
Better clarification and definition of what that 30 was.
Well, as you can see, a lot of talk in that area. The committees have heard it. I got that impression at the board meeting, and that we're probably going to see some quick reaction there, is how I came away with it. And in that, the other thing that kind of surprised me, and I mentioned this yesterday, is that they're really putting an emphasis on not what the course name is or the number is, but what the content of the course is, and how it applies to the accounting profession. That with data analysts and the changing technologies that we have, it may not be an accounting course, but it may be something that is so useful and being applied by so many CPA firms today in a test work that we should consider that, because that technology is changing, and that very much is needed to perform an audit, and specifically as we come forward, because I get the feeling that from just talking to the people in the room that the way we conduct audits is going to dramatically change in the next 2 years when this new software hits the ground. And so that was the feel in the meeting. And lastly, the annual meeting is in Boston, October 27th through the 30th at the Westin Copley in downtown. And we are pushing in our committee for regionals. We asked them to push again to go ahead and get the information on the website and get a tentative schedule, so that if boards want to participate, they can buy tickets cheaper because it's in advance. So NASBA said that in our committee or in our meeting, they indicated the next 2-3 weeks they would have that up, so that it would help the board, so they could go ahead and start the process of trying to get it approved. And that's all I have to report.
Questions for Andy? Anybody else have a report from NASBA on the committee they serve on?
I'm on the audit committee, which is just getting ready to be in season because NASBA's year end is June. So we start getting, the way that committee works is we start getting a lot of emails about mid-September, drafts of the audit reports and the drafts of the communications with the auditors, and our auditors are LBMC here in Nashville. Mid-September, we start getting a lot of things to review, and then we have a meeting, once the audit is complete, we have a meeting to go over we've reviewed the reports, the footnotes, and the MD&A. A lot of the work on that committee is through email, but then we have 2 meetings a year. One final report is gone over at the annual meeting in Boston. So one other thing that I would mention, Colleen asked me to talk to a guy, Joe Maslot at AICPA, about taking a survey on the CPA exam, and it was called a FAR content thing. It took like 3 hours to go through that thing. Mine was on FAR, audit section. I don't know if yours was similar or not, but it's saying, what do you think should be tested on the CPA exam? You know, what kinds of things when someone comes in as a new taking the exam, what do you expect them to have? What kind of talents do you want them to have? What do you want them to be tested on? But it was pretty interesting.
It's like ranking the sections about what was more relevant.
Yeah, the relevance of certain items on the exam. So,
It was extremely interesting. I enjoyed it.
yeah, it was pretty deep.
It was.
I think that speaks to, I don't know that any of us have really said this, but they have talked about not expanding the exam past the current time allotment. So they're looking at things, although they may be adding things, they're also looking at things they can remove that aren't relevant any
A
longer.
lot of irrelevant stuff that's
Yeah.
just not necessary.
And I can address one thing. They kind of thought, cost accounting is really done by software now. And so they said that, why do you just need the concept of it? It shouldn't be a full course and be tested as heavy as it is on the exam. And so they said they were kind of, the first talk was they were kind of leaning to cutting that back way back on the exam.
Section.
I have just a little bit to say about the committee I'm on, the CBT, which deals with the of the exam. We had a meeting, and most of the discussion was in 2 areas. One was that I'm learning that they use these committees as almost focus groups to talk about some of the ongoing issues that we've already addressed, that Andy has reflected. But then we deal with the nuts and bolts of what the administration issues are. So security has, the ways that people cheat have really escalated. So people have glasses that have cameras trying to steal the content. And I was sort of surprised because there was something where, a guy had, I forget, something strapped to his leg, and people had glasses, and I thought, well, aren't they banned forever? And they're not. I mean, it was, well, they have to sit out for a session or something, but it seemed to me that should mean they can't be a CPA. But I don't know what sort of network there is that's trying to accumulate these questions, but it was eye-opening to me to hear about some of those things. And then I also learned that sometimes things aren't moving as quickly as I thought. Issue where people sit down to take a part of the exam, and there's a process, and they're supposed to read it, and they have 5 or 10 minutes, and before that time ends, they're supposed to click into the exam, and if they don't, they time out, and they have to leave, and they have to pay for the exam. Now they, the testing centers were wanting to enforce that more, and our committee said, and just force them to do it. They shouldn't lose their money and all that. But the issue was they were dumping information. They called it a brain dump. So during those 5 or 10 minutes, they were frantically writing down lists of things. And that's not, that is okay. It's just that they were doing that and timing out. And, it was sort of like, was this cheating? Or they're getting 10 more extra minutes. So it just seemed like the whole committee said, you've just got to have a simpler way. If they want to spend their time reading that statement that they've had previously, they can. If they want to spend lots of their test time dumping lists, that's their prerogative. Also, the whiteboard, they use whiteboards, not paper, and there was a lot of push. Like, what we kept saying was, let's not put hurdles in front of these students when we're having trouble getting people to even take the exam. Let's simplify it. But we had approved that back in January, and then they said, well, we're still considering it. So I don't know that anything has been done about those issues. I think the process to approve changes is pretty complex. But I'm learning a lot about some of the issues that people go through.
I'm on the CPA Examination Review Board, and this board or committee looks at the policies and procedures that help to ensure that the CPA exam can be relied on by all the state boards of accountancy. So we completed our work, and our chairperson talked about the report and was happy to report that the boards can rely on the CPA exam. So this is for the past year. So our work will begin for this upcoming year, this fall, doing field work, interim field work, and then we'll go through the audit process for the rest of the year, the first part of next year. So this is like a 3-year commitment. But it's interesting, and some of the things we look at the Prometrics, who does the computer-based testing, and so we look at their procedures and do secret shops. I think Wendy has done a secret shop before, and we look at the policies and procedures that NASBA has in place, and also the AICPA, and have some interaction with the Board of Examiners that you're going to be on. So it's pretty comprehensive and pretty interesting. I could pull out my old internal auditing experience, so it's good.
I serve on the Finance and Administration Committee, and actually was unable to attend due to an accident at my company, and so I needed to remain in Nashville. But I think Andy, I know he gets the same presentation that I would get, so I think he's covered everything that is relevant, and I'll just be catching up a little bit with the committee over the next couple of weeks to make sure that I'm on board and understand everything that went on while in my absence. So that's all I have.
Anybody else?
Here's one thing I'd like to add. Just and being on the board, you get a lot of input about other states or jurisdictions and participation among the state boards of accountancies, and it never fails that Tennessee's name comes up. They say, wow, y'all really have a lot of active people on committees. Y'all have done a lot. They talk about Casey. They talk about our executive director and what she does, and she serves on some committees. And in fact, she doesn't know this, but in one of our presentations, there's a picture of her at one of the meetings, and it sets the tone for Tennessee. We're really leading in that area, and we represent the state well across the nation. And I know at one time we didn't have a lot of participation at the state board. And just a thank you to Judy and others before us. Judy encouraged everybody to do that and to get involved. And then our executive director encouraged it, and really the only reason I got involved was because I listened to those two, plus a retired board member said you need to get involved early. And so I think it makes a difference because they get to hear our input about what's going on, which really helps shape this uniting of all the boards across the nation. And so I really applaud the Tennessee Board for its activity and getting involved in that.
All right, we'll move along to committee reports. Larry, from the Licensing Committee.
Yes, the licensing committee met yesterday and addressed two issues that were on our agenda. The first being a request paying the notary requirement on two paper applications currently being used. No statutes or requirements for these notaries to be in place, but all other forms that are used don't have been requirement has been removed, but staff was asking for these two to be retained. After extensive discussion on this matter, the recommendation from the committee was to allow these two to continue to have notary requirements, but to ask the staff to research ways to utilize some form of verification of ID through means of ID, back from an email or something like that to verify that ID without having the paper notary form. So the committee is making that recommendation, and I will make that motion to the board.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 2 on our agenda,
So,
was a course that is currently being offered at East Tennessee State. We call it Information Technology for Accounting. And the question was, does this meet the educational requirement for the 30 semester hours or 45 quarter hours of accounting education, which is required? And the confusion becomes a lot of educational institutions are adding courses as part of the accounting curriculum, which may not be as well defined as others as far as meeting this requirement. This particular course was somewhat of an Excel course, but it was designed to allow the student to use Excel to further their understanding and their means of achieving accounting expertise, but just by using the Excel. So after reviewing the course curriculum or the course requirements and the course syllabus, the committee's decision was the course be qualified as a part of the accounting education requirement. And the second question we addressed was, is there a way to define in the future courses that were similar in nature as to whether they would be qualifying for this requirement? And we decided that was tough to qualify in general, but that we would need to just consider that on an individual case-by-case basis. So our recommendation and my motion is to approve this particular course part of the accounting education requirement.
motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the Enforcement Committee. Kevin?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We had extensive discussion yesterday with respect to the series of cases that were brought before us, and so I'll not go into that kind of detail again for this morning's meetings, but I do want to, as we go through each section, we'll deal with the consent agenda, then the proposed discipline, and then the representation. I will highlight as we get to each section the changes that the committee discussed from the report that was given in the read-ahead, and I understand that the members have now been given a revised version of that which tracks the changes, but I'll highlight those as we go through here. With respect to the consent agenda for case numbers 1 through 10, there were no modifications with respect to recommendations as a result of the committee discussions yesterday. And we have one case, number 3, where we have one board member that will need to recuse herself. So we'll deal with that one separately from the consent agenda. So at this time, for cases 1 and 2 and 4 through 10, are there any further comments or questions from any of the board members on the disposition of any of those items? Not, I'll offer a motion that we approve the recommendations with respect to case numbers 1 and 2 and case numbers 4 through 10 in the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. With respect to the second section or batch of cases under the proposed discipline subheader, there were a number of changes to the original staff recommendations that were ultimately approved by the committee in our discussions yesterday, and I will highlight those. And then I had one clarifying question when we looked at the revised report yesterday for case number 11. We were given a new case ID number that I had recorded as 2019-01309, and that case number is slightly different now in the revised version. There's an extra 1 at the end of that case. So I just want to make sure we have that case properly identified by the specific reference number.
That is the correct case number.
The one with the additional 1 at the end of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll make sure we get that reflected. And then what I'll do now in this section is highlight the changes that the committee adopted from the original recommendation. So for case 11, the original recommendation was a consent order with a $500 penalty for holding out as a CPA on an inactive license. After committee deliberations and additional discussion from board members yesterday, the committee voted to recommend to this board that the penalty be revised to $1,000 for that case in number 11. With respect to case number 12, also after extensive discussion on the part of the committee and other board members in attendance, the committee approved recommending to this board that the penalty, the assessment be revised from $1,000 to $5,000 for that particular case. And I believe those were the modifications with respect to the proposed disciplinary cases numbers 11 through 15. We will have another modification for number 16. And let me just double check and make sure here.
14 had rewording, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Thank you. It certainly did. Thanks for pointing that out, Pam. So in case number 14, after committee discussion yesterday, the revised wording for the recommendation is as follows. Formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon respondent's voluntary suspension of a CPA license for continuous failure to enroll in peer review. And then the revised language is respondent's CPA license shall be eligible for reinstatement after notification that respondent's firm has re-enrolled in peer review. If respondent decides to not perform a test work and completes an exemption form, the respondent's CPA license shall be eligible for reinstatement after 6 months from the time the exemption form is signed, and the respondent shall appear before the board prior to the reinstatement of the respondent's CPA license. So thank you, Pam. That was one additional recommendation that the board, or the committee rather, voted to impose for this item. I believe those are the changes to the cases that fall under the proposed discipline subcategory. Is there any discussion or further comment or questions on any of the proposed recommendations for this batch of cases? If not, I'll move that we accept the recommendations as revised that the committee made to the board yesterday after its deliberations.
Second that.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. The last item from the Enforcement Committee report relates to a representation of a case that the board had formerly been presented with, and then there had been subsequent activity associated with that case. And there's a slight revision with respect to the new recommendation on this one as well. The case involved an SEC investigation and ultimately a final ruling by the SEC arbitrator that was confirmed by court order in January of 2019. And the recommendation, as revised, that the committee recommends for the board's consideration is to authorize a consent order wherein the respondent CPA shall comply with all terms of the SEC order that respondent was given. The respondent CPA is going to be placed on suspension until December 12, 2020, which is the date laid out in the SEC consent order. And then we also further requested that the respondent appear before the board prior to the reinstatement of the respondent CPA license. So in summary, what we're doing is we're imposing discipline that is concurrent with the SEC's imposed discipline, and we're asking the respondent to come back before the board prior to the reinstatement of that person's license. Are there any questions or comments from committee or board members with respect to this recommendation?
Question. Just to extend point, given the quarterly meeting schedule of the board, when we have a request to appear, does it have to occur after the December 12th date, so it would be a January meeting, or could it be prior to the authorization? Just thinking through logistically how we handled that in the past. We've got a little while to think about this one, so I'm not that worried.
Yeah, so the way our rules work is that it's a 2-meeting process. So you apply, and the board considers your application, and then you appear at the following meeting. So, not sure if he could apply like in October and then appear in January. If that would be allowable, that might be something I just need legal to review.
If you have to wait until after that period run or expires, you're tacking on a pretty significant length of time to get 2 more meetings. If that's and that may be fine. It's a longer period than we're voting on just because of meeting scheduling.
Trying to recall, I don't recall, at least in the recent past, that we've had someone actually apply before the suspension period ended on a conditional basis. But I think, Todd, that's a very good question, and at least fortunately in this case we have some time to consider that, and we'll see what staff and legal counsel kind of come up with there on that aspect.
For an answer before you vote?
No.
Okay.
You got 30 seconds. I think it's a great point too. I mean, that conditional. I mean, if he doesn't meet what he needs to do, then obviously it wouldn't be approved at the next meeting. It's just kind of setting it up to be approved for that next meeting, I guess. I mean,
They submit their application, they also have to do a written statement about why they want their license back, what they've done since they've been suspended, the nature of the situation, those types of things. So the board reviews all of that, and I guess doesn't have to have them appear at the next meeting. You have the option unless it's in a consent order requiring them to appear, and then the following meeting is where they can take action on the application. So. But whether you can apply before your suspension date is what's not real clear. But it's pretty clear that it's a 2-meeting process. Now, the board could always elect, to have an additional meeting if they felt so inclined. We're not limited to 4 meetings a year.
Additional meeting be telephonic Is that permissible?
You have to, is it
We've
an
done a
emergency?
telephonic meeting before, but I don't know what the circumstances. Do you remember?
I don't remember if it was anything of this nature.
Typically, you have to just state your reason for why you're having this meeting in short notice and by telephone. I don't remember exactly the rules behind doing that, but it hasn't been a problem typically. You just have to support it in writing about why you're doing that. And if it's to the benefit of getting the licensee back into giving them a chance to get back to work, I think that would be reasonable.
Any further comments or questions on the disposition of the recommendation for this case? Short-term memory loss, but I don't recall that we had a motion in a second on this last one, so I'll offer the new recommendation effectively as a motion.
Offer a second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Don't we
I
still
think-
have consent agenda item number
We
3?
need
Item number
we gotta
three.
cover.
Yeah.
Janet recused herself.
And I do recuse myself.
We will go ahead and take a separate vote. Thank you, Andy. Any further comment or discussion on consent on case number 3? If not, I'll offer a motion that we accept the staff recommendation for case number 3. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Record note that Janet recused from that vote.
Is that all you've got?
It is.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Gay, the Laws and Rules Committee, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. We had a couple of pending rules updates. The first was the CPE rule change, which consisted of the nano CPE and basically our classifications becoming more consistent with NASBA's classifications. This rule will be in effect come September 4th, 2019. The other update had to do with our continuous testing. This is currently in the Attorney General's office for review, and then it will go on to the Governor's office. Second agenda item was we were asked to consider the rule change allowing course instructors to receive additional CPE credit exceeding the current 50% maximum. Mr. Satinsky presented his request to the board and committee. Wendy also provided a summary of other states and their maximum allowed hours for course instructors. We had some discussion, and after the discussion, we felt like there was no need to make a change to the existing rule as it stood, and that was all we have. Do we have to vote? We don't have to vote for no change, do we?
No, but what happens in the minutes is we typically limit the discussion on things that were voted on. So it may be good just to, for the record, say it was discussed and you came to this conclusion.
Mr. Chairman, the committee recommended that we make no change to the rules on the CPE for course instructors.
We've got a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And that is all.
Thank you. I guess I'm up here. Let's see. We had our executive committee meeting yesterday. We had 3 items on the agenda. With the first, we got a report of travel for the quarter. I don't believe we don't need a motion for that. I think it was just presenting the information. And then we had the presentation of the 2019 year-to-date financial report. I think we need a motion to accept that report as presented. Is that correct?
I'd like to do that, yes.
Okay. I will make the motion to accept the fiscal year 2019 year-to-date financial results as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then we also had a new travel plan, I guess, and a proposed budget amendment related to travel that we discussed yesterday. I don't remember if we came up with a recommendation or not. I think did we come up with a discussion, I mean, with recommendation?
There was a recommendation to approve the
Okay.
revised
Okay.
travel plan.
All right, so with that said, we have a motion on the floor to accept the proposed travel budget amendment as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That is the end of my report. Let me get back to my agenda here. I think the next item we have is election of officers.
Legislative update.
I'm sorry.
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
think
Yep.
we have anything, but she may want to highlight a few things.
There's just one small thing. Since our last meeting, there was the repeal of the professional privilege tax for CPAs, and that was signed by the governor on May 24th, and that will go into effect May 31st, 2020. So get yourself something nice on it.
Do you have any idea if, since that was appealed, that CPAs might become affected by the business tax and have to pay that instead?
I'm not sure.
I've heard, no.
More questions? Thank you. All right, now we'll go to any old business, additional old business we have?
I don't have any old business.
Okay. We have 2 items of new business. We have election of officers and then formations of committees. So I guess we'll start with the election of officers. How do you want to proceed?
I think typically how we've done this in the past, we everything has to be done in an open session, so we can't have advanced nominating committees or nominations. So basically everything and all discussion needs to happen here in this meeting. So typically the way we've done it in the past is someone's welcome to make a nomination. We can start with the chair position and move down, or with the secretary position and move up. That's up to you.
I'd like to start with the chairman, if I could.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Stephen Eldridge. Stephen has served this board for a long time. I think he's given a lot to this board. He's got a lot of history on this board, so, excuse me. I would just like to put Stephen up for that. I think he'd do a great job.
I'd like to nominate Kevin Monroe as chairman. I think with his leadership in the profession, his serving here on this board as long as he has, plus, you know, he kind of stepped up in the enforcement side and kind of took charge, and we didn't even have a hiccup. And his demeanor and how he applies it and how he comes across, I think is just really important for the profession. So I'd like to nominate Kevin.
All like to make any comments before we?
First, thank you, Andy, for the nomination. You know, the beautiful thing about this board is we have a very strong and caring and committed board, and we've got leaders such as Stephen, prior to them, Casey and Trey, you know, that are willing to step up and serve, including myself and the other members of the board. And so I'm happy to serve if selected, but I also am happy to work with Stephen or any other officer that we designate if selected, and I'll give best efforts as a board member, regardless of whether I'm an officer or not. So.
I appreciate the nomination as well. Been on the board for quite some time. I think that I've always had a tendency to be unbiased and straightforward with my opinions and with where I stood on things, and I would continue to do so without any bias and trying to do what's best for the public rather than any other influence. So I would appreciate y'all's consideration for a vote, and if not, then I'll support Kevin for position as well.
I move that nominations be closed for chairman.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so nomination. So, gosh, I don't, to vote, take a vote on one and then the other, or I guess we could do a roll call vote and vote and each one say who they would like to vote for?
Either is fine.
Just as a matter of discussion, I don't mind telling you, I talked to Wendy about this whole process, and it's a little bit awkward because everything has to be done in public. And so when you have two people like this running that are both qualified, well qualified, it for it, then awkward, because you got to take one vote first. Are we going to vote for everybody for Kevin and then everybody for Stephen, or
You do a roll call, you just say a name.
Correct.
and sometimes it matters who goes first, that people can be influenced by how the other people. I was suggesting with a phone call I made to Wendy when we have these elections. But it's awkward.
Well, I think we're all, we all respect one another in such a great way that, there's no offense. I would hope there'd be no offense on either part. I think we all know both candidates are very well qualified to be the chairman, and all of us would support whoever comes out, and I think both would probably end up being officers either way. So they're both clearly leaders, and I don't think. I just think I think we can do that. It may be awkward, but I think we can all, kind of move forward and just vote and be done.
Just so you know, two of us have already made the nomination, so it's not awkward for us at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to go on record that either one of them would be great, Stephen or Kevin. They're both very capable, and both are great kind of characters to represent the board as chairman. And so either way, either one would do a great job.
Just note, too.
Can I just vote? And
I'll make a
I would just
statement
note,
here in a
too,
minute.
that and I don't want to influence anybody, but I do want to make sure everybody understands. Stephen is in his last 2 years on his service here, and so everybody's going to get an opportunity, I think, to do something on a leadership standpoint. But I do want to highlight the fact that there are certain people that are term limited and are going to be term limited. So,
one other thing. Never mind. I'm good.
For the chair position, to take over at the end of this meeting, we have two nominations on the floor, Stephen Eldridge and Kevin Monroe. What we'll do is we'll go around and ask for an individual vote from each person. So Janet.
Stephen.
Sandy.
Kevin.
Pam.
Stephen.
Larry.
Yes.
And come back to you?
No, and come back to me.
He's got to think.
I'll say Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin.
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 Okay. Kevin.
Kevin?
Okay. Stephen.
Stephen.
Gay.
Stephen.
Greg.
Kevin.
Todd. Trey.
Stephen.
And Judy, sorry.
Kevin.
Kevin. Okay. Okay, so congratulations, Kevin.
Hang on.
With 6
Did
votes.
you go? You did vote.
Oh, yeah.
You did.
Did vote.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
With 6 votes, you have the majority vote. Congratulations. Okay, so now we need to take nominations for the vice chair position.
I nominate Stephen.
Okay, we have a nomination for Stephen.
I nominate Gay.
I'll give you a moment to speak. Any other nominations?
Did you say no?
I'll move the nomination cease. Can I do that?
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of closing nominations?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, if either of you would like to make a comment?
I don't I'm not interested in running for vice chairman.
Chairperson.
Hmm?
Chairperson.
That makes this one easy.
Chairperson.
So we can still vote. I mean,
Well, there's
Oh, yeah, yeah. Stephen, is there anything else, anything you'd like to say? Okay, okay. All right, so we have 2 nominations on the floor for vice chair. That'd be Gay Moon and Stephen Eldridge. So we'll take a roll call vote.
Stephen.
Andy?
Stephen.
Stephen?
Gary? Kevin? Stephen? Gay? Greg?
Stephen.
Todd?
Stephen.
Trey?
Stephen?
And Judy?
Stephen.
Okay. Congratulations, Stephen.
Let me borrow your glasses.
I wasn't interested.
Show that Gay got no votes.
She will also let the record show she was not interested in the position. Okay, so the last position is secretary, which Gay has been serving in that position. That typically is the individual that reviews our draft minutes and compares them against the video, make sure we've got that content accurate, and then signs off on those minutes. So are there any nominations for the secretary position?
I nominate Gay Moon for that position again.
I would accept that nomination.
Second that. I move that nominations be closed.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations, Gay. All right, so that,
I think that vote was for
Did I-
closing nominations.
okay, I'm sorry, closing nominations. Okay, so.
Make sure
Yes,
Gay is
you're probably-
official here.
You're probably right. I'm not used to doing this side of it. So we have a nomination for Gay to serve in the secretary position. With no other nominations, we'll just take a voice vote. So all in favor of Gay serving in the secretary position, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So congratulations, Gay. Again. Okay, so we have the board officer positions taken care of, and now I will work with Kevin over the next month or so to establish committees assignments. So if you all have any thoughts on where you'd like to serve, feel free to let me know, and I can share those with Kevin. And we will let you know about those before the next meeting so that you know. But the statute and rule give the chair the authority to make those selections.
Clarify, one can serve on more than one committee if the person has a preference. So.
And you can make motions if you're on the committee or not. Yes. Doesn't matter.
You can tell it.
There's an honor system there, though, that if you did it by mistake, you have to confess it. So.
Right.
I guess the last thing I would like to bring up is I've mentioned the sunset hearing. And I would give you the first opportunity, Kevin, to attend that with me. Are you available on the 21st of August? Okay. So is there anyone else as a backup that would be available that day to attend, Stephen? To attend if necessary?
I had a conflict.
Okay. The August 21st. And it would be a full day because the meeting starts at 10, and then we have the rule review as well at 1, I believe. Okay. Well, I will, I guess, reach out if anything comes up with Kevin and he's unable to do that. I'll reach out to another one of you if needed. Okay. I may try to pull locally if something happens quickly that we need somebody, so keep that in mind. So typically the ones I've watched from a few weeks ago, the chair basically just introduced themselves and there wasn't a lot of activity. Never can tell. So And I think that that's all I have. If we would like a motion to adjourn.
That's for a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Motion to second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. See y'all on the
Should we, just for the, should we
Yeah.
leave these? I would think they need to
The
be
legal
destroyed.
reports that you
Yeah.
provided, sure, and we'll shred them.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're good.